Hi everybody, my name is Stephen Fleener and I'm going to tell you the most interesting story ever told. It's the story of life. And it all started 3.5 billion years ago when our planet looks totally different than it does today. In fact, our planet was so different that it couldn't harbor any life at all. There were hot volcanoes spewing magma and lava everywhere. There was clouds of noxious sulfur gas. The oceans were filled with acid. It was so inhospitable that no life existed at all. Not plants, not bugs, not animals, not even bacteria. Until one day, some floating nucleotides decided to come together. And they came together and formed the most important molecule ever to be made, DNA. And that DNA formed some RNA. And that RNA formed some protein. And that protein folded up into an enzyme, and all of a sudden you had chemical reactions happening in your cells. Except they weren't in the cells, they were just in the ocean, the acid ocean. And the acid ocean was not a friendly place to live, not for the DNA or the RNA, and certainly not for the proteins or the enzymes. That acid degraded the enzyme and the protein and the RNA and the DNA. And it was back to square one. You are back to this acid ocean. There was nothing, no chemical reactions, no kind of life, until one day some more nucleotides came together and they formed DNA again. And that DNA formed RNA, and that RNA formed protein, and that protein folded up into an enzyme. And it did some kind of chemical reaction, and it kind of looked like life, but the acids got back at it and it ate them all again. And then one day something really, truly magical happened. The DNA came back, as you would have guessed. It formed, and it was in this scary acid ocean. And it tried to make some RNA, but the acid was trying to attack it and destroy it before it was even born. But then something else formed that day. Around the DNA and the RNA and the protein that folded into an enzyme formed a membrane. And with this membrane, the first cell was born. This was the cell membrane. This is the ancestor of all life on Earth today, the original first cell. And that cell lived a long, happy life, making some RNA from its DNA, making some protein from its RNA, folding up an enzyme from that protein, and that enzyme could do all kinds of different functions. It made all kinds of different enzymes, and the cell did its job as a cell, until one day it got lonely. It was the only cell in this huge, scary, big world, so it decided to make a copy of itself. It used some of its enzymes to copy its DNA, and then it did asexual reproduction to divide into two cells. And now on Earth you had two different cells. Those two cells were exactly identical because their DNA was copied identically through this process of asexual reproduction. And those two cells lived long, happy lives until they decided to divide into two more cells. So 2 cells became 4 cells, and 4 cells divided into 8 cells, and 8 cells divided into 16 cells, and 16 cells divided into 32 cells, to 64, to 128, to 256, to 512, to 1024, and so on, until one day you had millions of cells, billions of cells, all exactly identical to each other. And many years passed where these cells continued to do asexual reproduction. Division, where you produce 2 identical cells and they can produce 2 more identical cells, and life on Earth began to get populated with all these identical cells. That's a really, really bad ending to the story, because if all life on Earth was identical back then, and it continued to do asexual reproduction and to divide, making identical cells, shouldn't all life on Earth be identical today? Why do we have different plants and different animals and different kinds of mammals and different kinds of insects and different kinds of bacteria? Why is there such diversity of life on Earth today? When did one of these cells become different from the rest? Well, it all happened one day when the little tiny change in DNA happened. That change is called a mutation. And that mutation in the DNA made an entirely brand new protein that had an entirely brand new function, and made this cell uniquely different from all the rest of the cells, which would change forever life on Earth today. What's to come? Stay tuned.